Chapter 20. A Small Piece of Home. The first thing Tommy noticed when he woke up was that he was thirsty as fuck. Oh, also his head was killing him, and his body was pretty sore too. Honestly, he was just kind of having a shit time all around. His thoughts were fuzzy as he struggled to remember why exactly he felt so shitty. He knew there was a reason. Something had happened. Something big. But he was still half asleep, and trying to grasp onto blurred memories was like grabbing at wisps of smoke that were blowing just out of his reach. Tommy tried to focus on figuring out where he was, first and foremost, because that seemed like a good place to start getting his bearings. He was laying in a bed. He could tell that much. The mattress was plush and cradled his sore limbs in all the right places. His head was also on an unbelievably squishy pillow, and he could feel his cheek being smushed into a soft pillowcase. It was odd. He wasn't used to sleeping in a bed after... Wait. All at once, everything came flooding back. The kidnapping. Talking to Dream. Flame not helping him. The Syndicate showing up to save him. The memory of hearing his own bones break echoed in his ears, and although the memories were addled by pain, he, unfortunately, could recall the entire past few minutes he'd been conscious with perfect clarity. Ender, teleporting him out. Siren, crouched down next to him, apologizing over and running his hands through Tommy's hair. Seeing Wilbur's eyes staring out at him from under Siren's mask. Tommy finally giving in and letting the puzzle pieces slot into place in his mind. Siren was Wilbur. The confirmation felt like someone knocking the wind out of him. Of course a part of him had already known. Hell, looking back it was painfully obvious in retrospect. Wilbur had even joked about meeting Siren over fried chicken sandwiches, back when Tommy was still unsure if he could even call Wilbur a friend. So much had happened since then. Wilbur had lied to him, over and over again, acting like he didn't know Tommy had healing powers when he healed him in the soot kitchen the first time he came over, politely not questioning all the times Tommy came back late from a shift at the cafe, asking Tommy what he thought of Wilbur after healing him as Siren. Oh, fuck. He had just been sitting there basking as Tommy praised Wilbur to high heavens. Anger stirred in Tommy's gut. He took advantage of his secret identity and used it to find out what Tommy thought of him in his civilian form. That was just... It was fucking embarrassing for him. But could he really be mad at Wilbur for that? If Tommy was in the same position, given the opportunity to find out what Wilbur thought of him while hidden behind a mask, could he really say he wouldn't do the same? Tommy wasn't sure. There was so much to think about, and his head was throbbing far too much to make any sense of his conflicted thoughts right now. So instead, he decided to put off that crisis, and instead traded it for another. He opened his eyes. Despite his conflicted feelings toward the Soots right now, Tommy couldn't help the wave of relief that washed through him when he realized he was back in his bedroom at the Soots. But just as quickly as that relief came, it was replaced with bone-chilling fear. Was he really back at the Soots? Or was this another 404 dream? He'd already been tricked into thinking he was home before because of the hero. What if all of that? Flame wanting to save him, the Syndicate breaking in, Ender teleporting him and Siren out. What if that was a dream? Tommy bolted upright, ignoring the twin gasps from two figures sitting next to his bed. He didn't even look at who it was, instead lunging for the window behind his nightstand, pressing his hand against the glass and peering outside. The glass was cool, but not too cool. There was no fog blocking the view of the outside. He just saw the Soot's backyard, the same as it always was. But what if there was something else? What if 404 had learned his lesson from the windows, and instead found another way to hide that this was a dream? Could he really trust anything he was seeing? Tommy? A voice asked behind him, breaking him out of his thoughts. What are you doing? Tommy froze. He hadn't heard that voice in his dreams before. Whipping his head around, Tommy felt something seize in his chest when he saw Tubbo and Ronbu sitting next to the edge of his bed, both staring at him with identical expressions of worry. Neither of them appeared in the dreams with 404. If they were here, maybe that meant this was real. Tubbo? Ronbu? His breathing hitched. Is this real right now? Fuck. What if this was still a dream? His breathing picked up as his eyes darted around the room, trying to find a tell that this wasn't real. His heart pounded in his ears as he tried to find something, anything, that could prove to him that this was 100% reality. What do you mean? Of course this is real, Ronbu said, giving Tommy a worried frown. Tommy shook his head, curling his hands in and out of fists. I need you guys to prove it to me. Prove that 404 isn't... that he's not fucking with my head again. Tubbo and Ronbu shared a look. Suddenly, both of them lunged forward, and Tommy felt a sharp pinch on his arm, followed immediately by a stinging slap against his cheek. The pain startled him out of his panic. What the fuck was that for? What the fuck was that for? Tommy yelped, cradling his bright red cheek with his hand. Tubbo, why'd you slap him? Ronbu asked, staring at Tubbo with wide eyes. I thought we were just supposed to pinch him at the same time. Tubbo put his hands up in mock surrender. I just thought a slap would be more effective. Tommy gave him a flat stare, and Tubbo at least had the decency to look sheepish. I mean, at least you know you're awake now, right? Well, he had a point. If this had been one of 404's dreams, Tommy was pretty sure getting pinched and slapped at the same time would have caused something weird to happen. And so far, everything seemed completely normal. His hands were still trembling as he took a shaky breath, twisting his fingers into the soft blanket covering his legs. This was reality. It had to be. Then there was a hand tugging his own away from the blankets, and he glanced up to see Ronbu squeezing his fingers. You're awake, Tommy. I teleported you out of there with Siren, remember? Tommy nodded. He remembered. Good. This is real, I promise. Ronbu reassured him, his hand around Tommy's, giving him something to focus on. Ronbu's hand felt perfectly real. There was even the ridge of a scar on his ring fingertip pressing into Tommy's hand, which Tommy knew the boy had gotten when he was trying to cut dry ramen noodles in half with a knife, because Tubbo wanted to be able to eat the dry noodles on the go as a convenient snack. Okay. Tommy breathed, the tension in his shoulders seeping out. I believe you. This was reality. He had actually been saved. He was finally home. Fucking hell, Tommy muttered, after a few moments of silence, a pounding headache slamming into him with the force of a truck. Breaking all your bones really does make you feel like shit. I'll say. You were passed out for like a day and a half, Tubbo told him. Tommy froze. A day and a half? Tubbo nodded, and Tommy dragged a hand down his face. What the hell even happened after I passed out? What he wanted to ask was, what happened to Dream? Did the Syndicate pin him down? Did the Syndicate kill him? As strange as it might seem, Tommy really hoped the latter wasn't true. Despite the fact that Dream literally kidnapped him, the idea of the Syndicate killing the man put a bad taste in his mouth. Dream hadn't meant to hurt him, and despite Tommy trying to get a rise out of him, he'd never been cruel to Tommy during his captivity. Sure, he was an annoying bastard with a superiority complex, but it didn't seem like he was a genuinely bad person. More like someone pushed to the edge of desperation, just trying to do what he thought was necessary. He didn't deserve to die. Well, Ronbu began, his eyes falling to his lap. After I teleported you and Siren out of there, I went back to the fight and we were all trying to pin Dream down. But I guess since you were gone and he knew he wasn't going to be able to find you again, he decided to just get out of there. The fucker basically sent out like a giant shockwave to knock us all down. Tubbo chimed in. We all fell onto our asses and Dream launched himself, Flame and 404 out the nearest window. By the time we all got to our feet, he was gone. So he escaped? Tommy asked, raising an eyebrow. Both of them nodded, and something loosened in Tommy's chest. Sure, it wasn't great to know that Dream was still out there running free and could very well kidnap him again if he wanted, but it was better than him being dead. I'm sorry, Tommy, Ranbu said, his voice strained. Tommy shrugged. Not your fault. You guys tried your best, and honestly, I think it might be better this way. Who knows what the Syndicate would have done to him if you guys managed to catch him. Ranbu winced. I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't have been pretty. But I'm also just so incredibly sorry for letting you get hurt. Tommy frowned. What do you mean? It's not your fault Dream decided to make me float in the air like some fucking ghost movie. But it's my fault he threw you, Ranbu argued, gnawing on his lip. If I hadn't knocked into him, he wouldn't have chucked you into that wall and you wouldn't have gotten hurt. Ranbu really did blame himself for everything, didn't he? Ranbu, are you fucking kidding? What you did was totally awesome, he exclaimed. You were so badass out there. You literally charged at Dream and faked him out. No one else would have been able to pull that. Ranbu blinked. But you got thrown into the wall because of that. I should have been more careful. Tommy rolled his eyes. There's no way you could have known that would happen. Plus, there was probably no way of ending that standoff without me breaking at least a few bones. Still, nope, Ranbu, you're done with the self-blame. Tubbo cut in, slapping a hand over Ranbu's mouth. Remember, we've been working on this. Ranbu sighed, deeply, but didn't bother trying to fight the hand over his mouth. Tommy would have laughed at the utter defeat on his face if the context were any different. So you guys really worked with the Syndicate to save me? Tommy asked after a few moments of silence, realizing he still had no idea how that came about. Yep, we sure did. Tubbo nodded. By the way, we should probably tell you this before one of us slips up and you freak out, but we know Wilbur, Techno, and Phil are Siren, Blade, and Zephyrus. Wait, what? Tommy blinked. They knew? How the hell did Tubbo and Ranbu know Siren was Wilbur? Did he tell them? But why wouldn't he have told... Before he could finish that thought, the second part of Tubbo's sentence slammed into Tommy's mind like a train. The fuck do you mean Blade and Zephyrus are Techno and Phil? Tommy gasped, staring wide-eyed at his friends. Like, I figured out that Wilbur was Siren, but... And then, the rest of his sleep-addled mind put the rest of the pieces into place. Siren, Zephyrus, and Blade had always acted like a family. Tommy had suspected the three of them were family ever since that time he had healed Zephyrus up when he had teased Blade about his antics as a teenager. If Wilbur was Siren, then of course Blade was Techno, and Zephyrus was Phil. Groaning, Tommy dragged his hands down his face. Do I know any fucking civilians? He grumbled into his fingers. How did you guys even find out their identities anyway? We just figured it out. Ranbu shrugged. But, we should probably also mention that they know we're Nuke and Ender. Tommy's head whipped up at that. What? Suddenly, his eyes widened. Wait, I didn't tell them if that's what you're thinking. I swear on my life I haven't told anyone about you. Tommy, it's okay, we know. Tubbo cut him off. Wilbur just figured us out like we figured him out. We know it wasn't you. Oh, good. Tommy really didn't want his friends to think he'd betray them like that. Shoulders slumping, Tommy ran a hand through his hair, wincing when his fingers snagged on blood-matted curls. Can you guys please just explain how the fuck this all happened? You guys working with the Syndicate and finding out each other's identities and just being okay with it all? Tubbo and Ranbu shared a look, as if they were silently debating which one of them had to take the job of explaining everything. After a few beats of their stare-down, Ranbu sighed and glanced back at Tommy and began to explain. Ranbu told him how they'd found Siren, Blade, and Zephyrus standing in front of the cafe, Siren clutching onto his broken phone and his backpack discarded on the ground. He went over Siren calling them by their names, and their subsequent return to their apartment, where all identities were revealed. Tubbo explained how he found Tommy, having managed to get access to a secret phone Dream used to rent out the warehouse he'd been kept captive in. Nuke and Ender joined in on a syndicate meeting to report their findings, and the group made a plan for how to break Tommy out. Tubbo and Ranbu only knew the identities of Siren, Blade, and Zephyrus, and those three were the only ones who knew Nuke and Ender's identities as well. Since rescuing Tommy, the Soots had been letting Tubbo and Ranbu sleep on the couch in the living room, knowing neither of them would want to leave. As Tubbo finished talking, Tommy found himself frowning at his blankets, his biggest question still being left unanswered. So are you guys, okay with working with the Syndicate now? Or are you going to go back to hating them after this? Tommy asked, the silent question of where do we stand now, hidden underneath his words. I mean, the Syndicate isn't as bad as we thought they were, Ranbu admitted, looking sheepish. They all seem to really care about you. And while I think we both expected them to be more focused on taking Dream down, that wasn't actually the case. After Dream, Flame, and 404 got away, no one bothered trying to chase after them. Instead, everyone started hounding me about you, asking if you were okay. I wouldn't say we're working with the Syndicate now, Tubbo chimed in. But I wouldn't be opposed to hearing them out if they ever need our help with future stuff. Tommy frowned, his mind flashing back to that security footage of Siren killing all those men. But you guys said it yourself, the murderers. I thought you'd never want to work with them. Considering the number one hero literally kidnapped you and had you tied up in a warehouse on the edge of the city, I think the whole villain-hero situation is a bit more complicated than we thought. Ranbu murmured, picking at his nails. Tubbo nodded. If Dream is willing to go that far to get information, then I think I can understand why the Syndicate goes to the lengths it does. Tommy stared at the two of them in shock. Of all people to reconsider their stances on the Syndicate, Tommy wouldn't have guessed it would be Tubbo and Ranbu. But here they were, saying that they wouldn't mind hearing the Syndicate out if they ever wanted to work together again in the future. As if that whole screaming match the three of them had had over Tommy's healing just meant nothing. So where does that leave us? Tommy asked, struggling to keep the bitterness out of his voice. Are you guys still pissed at me for healing them? To his surprise, Tubbo's response was immediate. No. Neither of us are pissed about that anymore, and honestly, it was fucking stupid of us to react like that in the first place, he said, scooting a bit closer to the edge of the bed. That was so fucking shitty of us. Especially me. I was a proper dick to you for no good reason, even before you found out we were Nuke and Ender. Tommy shrugged. I mean, I was keeping my own secret, so it was kind of understandable. No, it's not, Tubbo said, his voice firm. It was unfair to you. I was just being a stubborn idiot. We were keeping a huge secret from you, so I had no right to be pissed at you for doing the same. And I should have tried harder to tell you what was going on, Ranbu added. I shouldn't have just given up as easily as I did, even though I could see how things were splintering between us because of the secrets. Tubbo nodded, nudging Ranbu's shoulder before reaching forward to take one of Tommy's hands. Look, we both fucked up, but me especially. I was an arsehole to you in so many ways, and I shouldn't have let my stubbornness let everything go to shit the way it did. I'm sorry, Tommy. For all of that shit. Suddenly, Ranbu joined in to rest his hand on top of Tubbo's. I'm sorry too. Tommy's breathing hitched as he looked between his two best friends. His family. His heart ached because he had missed them. He'd missed both of them so fucking much. Without saying anything, Tommy just opened his arms, and the two of them got the message as they surged in for a group hug. Tommy was still a bit sore, but he held back his winces as Tubbo buried his face in Tommy's shoulder and Ranbu rested his chin on top of Tommy's head. I also owe you guys an apology, Tommy said, his voice muffled by Ranbu's sweatshirt. You don't? No, I need to apologize, Tommy continued, cutting Tubbo's argument off. Even if you weren't nuking Ender, I shouldn't have hidden my healing from you guys. It just put you guys in more danger to be in the dark than if I'd just been honest with you. I won't fuck that up again. How about we just agree not to lie to each other anymore? Rambu asked above Tommy's head. Tommy laughed as the arms around him squeezed tighter. Sounds good to me. Me too, Tubbo agreed, his hair tickling Tommy's jaw. The three of them stayed like that for a few moments, Tommy just relishing in the fact that he had his best friends back. The awkwardness between them had dissipated, and even though Tommy wasn't sure how things were going to go forward from here, at least he knew he had the two of them by his side again. After a little bit, Tubbo and Rambu pulled back so they were properly sitting in their seats again, and Tommy felt lighter than he had in weeks. Though, now that the three of them had said what needed to be said, Tommy noticed the other odd absence from his room. So, not that having you two here isn't fantastic, because it is. But where's Will? I thought he would have been hovering over me, waiting for me to wake up all worried and shit. Tommy asked, frowning at the closed door to his bedroom. Well, Wilbur wasn't sure if you'd want to see him when you woke up, Rambu explained, wringing his hands in his lap. He thought it'd be better if he just kind of stayed away until you figured out if you wanted to talk to him or not. Tommy's frown deepened. Did he want to talk to Wilbur? Thinking about him again brought back that same anger from when he'd first woken up. Wilbur had lied to him. He'd been lying to Tommy ever since that first day he came to the cafe. He knew exactly who Tommy was and what he could do, but pretended like that was their first time meeting. Had Wilbur even wanted to be Tommy's friend? Or had he just wanted to keep Tommy close by because of his powers? His heart twisted painfully at the idea that Wilbur might have just befriended him because he was a healer. Was that all he was good for? No. Wilbur genuinely cared about him. He'd called Tommy his brother, for fuck's sake. Of course he cared. Right? Or was it all just a ploy? To get Tommy to trust him so he could keep him close? Tommy wanted to believe it wasn't all a lie, but considering how much Wilbur had already lied to him, he honestly wasn't sure. A part of him wanted to ask Wilbur directly, but the idea of seeing him right now, when his body still ached and his thoughts were still stuffed with cotton, leaving everything feeling a bit too raw, a bit too bright, he wasn't sure if he was ready for that conversation yet. Do you want to talk to Wilbur? Tubbo then asked, noticing Tommy's pained expression. Tommy stared at his hands for a moment, before shaking his head. Not right now. I need some time to think things over. Both of them nodded in understanding. Neither of them were going to push him to see Wilbur if he didn't want to, and Tommy was glad for that. Techno and Phil were probably going to want to see him at some point too, and while Tommy wasn't as mad at them as he was at Wilbur, they still had some explaining to do. Before Tommy could worry too much about his future confrontations, though, there was a buzz from Tubbo's phone, and he furrowed his brows at the screen. Apparently you have a visitor, Tommy. Tommy blinked. A visitor? Phil says she's waiting outside your door, Tubbo said, reading the text. They all turned their heads to the door, and Tommy frowned as he tried to figure out who it could be. If the person was a woman, then maybe it was Nemesis? She seemed like the type who would visit him while he was sick. Maybe she had Thanatos with her. Hopefully, Tubbo and Rambu were cool with all the Syndicate members and not just the Soots, because if not, things would get really awkward. I'll get the door, Rambu said, pushing to his feet. Tubbo moved to stand as well as the door swung open, and Tommy's eyes widened when he saw who was on the other side. Puffy? Tommy exclaimed, lurching forward to try and stand up, only for Tubbo to hold him down to the bed with a hand on his shoulder. Puffy, who was holding a Tupperware container of food and a takeout cup from the cafe, smiled at the three of them. Hi, guys. I wanted to stop by and check on Tommy, she said, her bright curls bouncing around her head. Rambu blinked. Come in, he stammered, awkwardly standing aside so she could come into the room. Why the hell was Puffy here? There was no way she could have known what happened. Phil must have lied to her and said he got sick or something, as the reason he had missed his shifts. They were friends, after all, so Tommy wouldn't be surprised if they talked. But why hadn't Phil warned him what the cover story was? Puffy stepped into the bedroom, making her way over to Tommy's bedside and setting down the food and steaming cup on his nightstand. "You look like shit," she teased, pressing a hand to his forehead to check his temperature. "You feeling all right, though?" Tommy was floundering, trying to figure out what he could and couldn't say in front of her. Yeah, I'm okay." "Do you feel up to having a conversation? There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, but I don't want to push you if you need more rest. It can wait," Puffy explained gently, running her fingers through his curls. "Am I fired?" Tommy asked, frowning at her. Puffy laughed. "No, you're not fired. It's not one of those conversations." "Well, thank goodness for that." Tommy breathed a sigh of relief and leaned further into Puffy's hand, enjoying the way her nails scratched his scalp. "I'm good to talk, then." "All right. Tubbo? Ronbu, do you guys mind leaving us alone for a bit? This is kind of private," she asked, shooting an apologetic glance at the two boys. Ronbu and Tubbo shared an uncertain look, but Tommy tried to reassure them with his eyes. This was Puffy. Even if he wasn't sure what lie Phil had told her, he could manage on his own. After a moment of hesitation, both of his friends filed out, letting the door click shut behind them. Once they were gone, Puffy settled herself in the seat Tubbo had been in, and gave Tommy a warm smile. "Phil told me what happened," she said without preamble. Tommy blinked. That could mean a lot of things. "He told you that Dream kidnapped you and the syndicate had to go rescue you?" Puffy finished, without missing a beat. "Yeah, he explained it all." "What?" Tommy froze, staring at Puffy in shock. She knew that Dream had kidnapped him, and that the fucking syndicate had rescued him, but she didn't even seem surprised. Had Phil told her about the healing thing? Hell, she didn't even seem confused as to why Phil was the one who told her all that stuff. Did she know Phil was Zephyrus? How the fuck would she know that? Did you? Tommy's thoughts were reeling as he tried to form a coherent sentence in response to that. Thankfully, Puffy seemed to take mercy on him. "I know about your work with the syndicate." Tommy blinked. Did Phil tell you?" Puffy's smile stayed soft and warm, not seeming even the least bit fazed by what she was saying. If anything, she almost looked sympathetic. "Tommy, there's a camera in the back room of the cafe." And just like that, Tommy's breath caught in his throat. There was a camera in the back room. That wasn't possible. He'd never seen a camera in there before. He would have noticed it, right? There was no way he could have missed something as obvious as that. If that was true, though, that meant Puffy had known this whole time. Ever since he first healed Thanatos in the back room, Puffy would have known. Which meant she had let him lie to her face for months without saying anything, without even trying to stop it. "What?" Tommy squeaked out, unable to piece together a sentence more complex than that. "The camera is kind of hidden behind the shelves. I didn't put it like that on purpose, things just got moved around. But yeah, I've known about your healing since you first helped Thanatos and Nemesis," Puffy explained, her tone impossibly gentle. "So you've known this whole time?" Tommy asked, his hands shaking. "Who do you think was keeping the first aid kit stocked with bandages?" Oh shit. Fucking hell, how could he have been so stupid? How did he never notice that the first aid kit never seemed to run out of bandages, despite the fact that he never bothered to refill it? "I'm such an idiot," Tommy mumbled, hiding his face in his hands. "Are you pissed at me?" Puffy snorted and reached out a hand to pull his away from his face. "Do you really think I would have kept refilling the first aid kit if I didn't approve of what you were doing?" Tommy frowned. "But how are you not pissed? I lied to you. And I was using your back room to heal fucking supervillains. You should hate me." You were trying to help people, Puffy reassured him. I understand why you didn't want to tell me, because if I were anyone else, I probably would have turned you into the police. But you're just a kid, Tommy. One who got thrown into this world of villains and heroes without any kind of warning. You did the best you could because you just wanted to help. I can't be mad at you for that. Fucking hell. Tommy was shocked he hadn't had a heart attack from all the bombshells being dropped on him today. I'm sorry, Puff, he muttered. I wouldn't have used your back room if I had another option. I couldn't bring them back to my apartment, and since I worked the closing shifts, I knew no one else was going to be around, so I just figured, like I said, it's fine. I'm just glad you're safe now, Puffy said, squeezing his hand. She then pulled her hand away from his and shoved something warm between his fingers. Tommy took a sip of the drink and almost moaned when the vanilla floral taste hit his tongue. It was a London fog. Not too sweet, but not bitter either, with a comforting taste that warmed him from the inside out. Thanks for bringing me this, Tommy said, wrapping his hands around the cup. Of course. I thought coffee might make you a little too wired, so I thought a London fog might be a nice change of pace, Puffy told him. Then she gestured to the Tupperware on his nightstand. I also brought you some pastries from the cafe. Thought you deserved something sweet after everything you went through. Oh, fuck yeah! Tommy cheered, grabbing the Tupperware with his free hand and prying off the lid. His eyes widened when he saw the chocolate croissant sitting on top, and immediately picked it up to tear a bite out of it. Thank you, Puffy, he said, his mouth full of croissant. Puffy chuckled. You're welcome. There was a moment of silence as Tommy chewed his food, the chocolate melting across his tongue and washing down the sticky sweetness with his tea. It was then he thought more about what Puffy had said, and suddenly something clicked. Wait, he said, swallowing the bite of his croissant. Do you know the syndicate's identities? Puffy's smile faded, and she nodded. Yeah, I do. Phil and I go way back. Tommy frowned. There was still something not adding up. But how does being old friends with Phil mean you can just casually know that he's one of the scariest supervillains in the city? Dropping her eyes to her lap, Puffy shrugged. I mean, I guess there's no point in hiding it from you now, she muttered, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Taking a breath, she looked up to meet his eyes. Did I ever tell you I had powers? Tommy shook his head. Puffy stared at him for a moment, as if debating something in her mind. Then she reached over to his nightstand. Before he could ask what she was doing, her hands began to glow bright red. Tommy watched as the little figurine he had of the Able sisters lifted off his nightstand and settled itself so it was floating in between Puffy's palms. She began to move her hands like she was stretching dough, and although she wasn't touching the figurine directly, it moved as if she was. The figurine went from hard plastic to some kind of soft, Play-Doh-like material, and Tommy's eyes widened as he recognized what she was doing. That's matter manipulation, he whispered, staring as Puffy reshaped the hard plastic into a similarly sized figurine, albeit having turned the colors into a swirling mess. Yep, sure is, Puffy confirmed, pressing her hands together to compress the plastic into a flat disc before she resumed her dough-like stretching with it. Matter manipulation. The ability to reshape just about anything as long as you weren't creating or destroying the matter itself. There had been one hero who had that ability, one whose palms glowed red whenever she used it, one who had a wild head of curly white hair and an impossibly kind smile. You're the captain, Tommy said, staring at Puffy in awe. Even though her hair was now split dye between brown and white, it was so obvious now that he knew it was her. The captain had always been dressed in her bright red coat, the upper half of her face covered by a sheep-like mask that only showed her mouth, with her white curls pulled back into an impossibly puffy ponytail. Puffy, while no longer donning the sheep mask, had always had a preference for bright red shirts and keeping her hair tied back, and although Tommy would have never figured it out on his own, it still felt painfully tongue-in-cheek in retrospect. I was the captain, she corrected him. I retired when the Hero Committee and I couldn't exactly see eye to eye on some things. Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. Puffy was the captain. The captain was his boss. Holy shit. You were my favorite hero when I was a kid, Tommy exclaimed, beaming at Puffy. Wait, seriously? Puffy asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, seriously, you were the only hero I ever liked. All the others were such stuck-up assholes, but you weren't. You were so cool and just so fucking badass. He laughed, feeling somewhat in shock. Holy fuck, I can't believe I work for the captain. This is the coolest day of my life. Puffy flushed at the compliments. I appreciate it, but unfortunately those days are long behind me. Doesn't mean you're not still a badass. Tommy grinned. Puffy snorted. Thanks, Tommy. She stopped stretching the plastic in her hands, returning the figurine back to its original state before the glow on her hands faded away. Mabel and Sable dropped into her palm, and she gently put the figurine of the duo back on the nightstand. The reason I retired was because the Hero Committee was going in a direction I didn't like. They were becoming more focused on the donors' wants instead of what the city needed. Plus, they were turning more blind eyes to heroes who broke the rules. The joy of finding out Puffy was the captain quickly faded when he caught up to what she was saying. Do you mean heroes trying to kill villains? Pursing her lips, Puffy nodded. Not just trying. Tommy's eyes widened. Wait, do you mean a villain actually got killed? Yeah. But it's not my place to talk about the details of who he was. I watched it happen. I was at that fight, and there was nothing I could do. I tried to stop it, but soon he was dead. And when I reported the hero responsible to the committee, they just didn't do anything. They covered it up, so the media didn't hear about it. And the hero got off scot-free. Bile rose in Tommy's throat. So what happened when you left? Puffy kept her eyes on her lap. Well, I'd already considered leaving, because my face had gotten revealed to Zephyrus during a fight. It was an accident, but I didn't know what he was going to do, since he knew what I looked like and could easily find out who I was. So when the other villain was killed, that was just kind of the final straw. She explained, wringing her hands together. After I retired, Zephyrus found me walking down the street one night. I thought he was going to kill me for revenge or something, but he instead congratulated me on leaving the committee and asked if I wanted to join the syndicate. But you said no? Tommy asked. I said no. Puffy nodded. I was just tired of all the hero-villain bullshit at that point. Plus, I wanted the chance to spend more time with my son. So I refused his offer, and instead of getting upset, he took off his veil and introduced himself. And so we've been friends ever since. Holy shit. Tommy blinked, trying to process all of that. It made sense how Puffy and Phil knew each other now, but it was still reeling to find out that Puffy was the captain. And to be honest, he was still a bit taken aback by the realization that Phil was Zephyrus, despite how stupidly obvious it was. Puffy gave him a tight-lipped smile. Yeah. I know it's a lot to process, but I figured you deserved to know the truth after everything you've gone through. Well, I appreciate that, but, Tommy cut himself off, frowning as he tried to think of how to word this. You know what Phil and the rest of the syndicate have done. Better than anyone else, probably, since you were literally a hero. But you still choose to be friends with them? No matter what he did, Tommy couldn't seem to get rid of the mental image of Siren killing all those men in that security footage. That was Wilbur. Wilbur killed all those people. How the hell was Tommy supposed to look at him the same way, knowing he'd done something like that? Puffy seemed to understand what he meant. I know that Phil, and by extension the rest of the syndicate, aren't good people, but I understand why they do what they do. I know I'm not going to get any of them to change their ways, especially not Phil. But I don't want to lose my friendship with him either. So yes, I still choose to be friends with the Syndicate. Maybe that doesn't make me a good person, and in the past that would have upset me a lot more, but I've gotten to a place where I can be okay with that. That made sense. It reminded Tommy of Flame. How he knew what Dream and 404 was doing was wrong, but he still couldn't turn them in because they were his family. The question that lingered in Tommy's mind was really what his stance on that was. Every time he thought back to that footage, he felt like he was going to be sick. But could he really cut ties from the Syndicate for that? Did he even want to? There was so much more to that situation that needed to be answered before he could even consider that question. More than anything, he needed to find out if any of it. His relationship with Wilbur, Phil saying he saw him as a son, just everything about his friendship with the Soots. He needed to find out if that was real, or if they had just been using him. He wanted to think it was real. He wanted that so fucking badly. But he just wasn't sure anymore, and it hurt. Not to mention, his body also hurt. Just, physically. His head was still pounding, and even though the croissant had soothed his grumbling stomach, his heavy limbs were begging him to lay down again. "You fallen asleep there, bud?" Puffy asked, quirking an eyebrow at him. It was only then that Tommy realized he had started swaying, and he shook himself awake again, so he could try to meet Puffy's eyes. I'm alright. Just really tired." "You should try to get some rest," Puffy told him, reaching out to squeeze his shoulder again before she pushed to her feet. "If you want anything from the cafe, just send me a text, and I'll make Foolish bring it over." Tommy snorted, watching as Puffy headed for the door. "I'm gonna make Foolish my bitch." Puffy grinned. "If he complains, I'll yell at him that you're sick and he needs to be nicer to you." "You're the best boss, Puff," Tommy told her, slumping back against his pillows. "And you're a really great kid, Tommy," Puffy said, her eyes softening as she stood in the doorway. "Do you want me to have Tubbo and Ranbu come back in here?" Tommy nodded, and Puffy held the door open as Tubbo and Ranbu both filed back in. He wondered if the two had been waiting outside the door the whole time. It wouldn't surprise him. They probably wanted to make sure whatever the talk with Puffy was about wouldn't upset him. Puffy let the door click shut behind her as she disappeared in the hall. Tubbo and Ranbu both stared at Tommy, as if they weren't sure why they were there. "Get your asses over here," Tommy grumbled, waving them towards the bed. "I'm tired as fuck and this mattress can fit all three of us." "Are you sure?" Ranbu asked, furrowing his brows. "We don't want to keep you up." Tommy gave Ranbu a flat look. "If I was passed the fuck out for a day and a half, I don't think you two are gonna keep me up. Now seriously, you guys need to feel this mattress. It's like 1,000,000 times better than ours back home." Tubbo was already moving before Tommy had finished speaking. He crawled up on the bed, yanking at the pillow under Tommy's head so it could fit both of them, while Ranbu sighed and settled himself on the other pillow. "Oh fucking hell, boss man, you've made a mistake," Tubbo said, squeezing up against Tommy's side. "We're stealing this mattress. I'm never sleeping on anything but this again." To be fair, Tommy could probably just buy this mattress for back home with all the money the syndicates paid him, Ranbu pointed out. Tommy snorted, his eyes already falling shut as Tubbo responded. "Yeah, but I want this mattress." "How would you even steal a mattress? It's not like it's something you can easily hide," Ranbu argued. "That's easy, you just gotta throw it out a window." "What? We're not throwing a mattress out of the window. It wouldn't even fit." "It could if you try hard enough." It literally couldn't. Even though there was still that conflicted ache in his chest, Tommy slipped off to the sounds of his best friends arguing, feeling like a small piece of home had slotted itself back in place.